You know, you have to be careful about making a weird show or watching a weird show. It may come back to haunt you. Enjoy.
Understand. Understand.
Carnival of Souls is legit in my top 5 horror movies of all time. I don't even give the distinction of calling it, classic horror or whatever, as it probably wouldn't make that list. But Carnival of Souls, it's just simply a bigger film than that. A film that should be cherished and studied for decades to come. Ask anybody who's seen it, and I'm sure they would agree. I mean, the film just gets more and more notoriety as the years pass. It truly is amazing, and it truly is a marvel of cinema. The 1998 remake, though? Not so much. The Carnival of Souls remake, aptly titled Wes Craven Presents Carnival of Souls. Good God, you guys remember when they were doing that? Oh my God. Well, the film's origins actually begin way back in 1989 when the original film saw a resurgence and even got a theatrical run and a cast reunion. And it was there in Kansas at that little film reunion where star Candice Hilligoss would first bring up the idea of a sequel to director Herc Harvey. Now this guy, he may have made one of the greatest horror films of all time, but he's not really what you expect. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the legendary Herc Harvey before we get to this abysmal remake. First off, Herc Harvey, he really wasn't a film director, so to speak. I mean, he was, but his thing was educational films, an arena that he was championed in and is held in high regard with his company Centron Films, winning many, many awards throughout his career. Herc was doing everything from instructional videos to safety protocols, and he got creative with it, and I've seen nearly all of his work, and a lot of it is actually very fun to watch. But Carnival of Souls would be his only foray into features, yet Harvey was an auteur nonetheless, and he took on heavy elements of Bergman and just German expressionism on its own when it came to Carnival of Souls. Hell, the guy, he wasn't even a big horror fan, so it's amazing how this film is just so high regarded these days. But he had this great idea, back in the day he had this great idea. An idea that would go on to inspire countless directors and horror films to this day. I mean, hell, there's some movies that really didn't even try to hide the fact that they're heavily inspired by the film, which is okay. But there are some that just blatantly ripped the thing off. I mean, it was basically completely remade for the Scream generation, if you will. Anybody else remember this goddamn movie? Good Lord. Now you know the story. You have your final girl being the sole survival of a tragic accident, being haunted by otherworldly spirits, and she's forced to investigate what she discovers is her own demise. Herc took stake of what he had. He had cameras, a crew, a script, the know-how, and he had this location, this perfect location, the abandoned Saltaire Carnival, a famous historical area that seemed to always come back from the dead after fires and floods and other catastrophes, only to ultimately be left desolate from yet another flood, and in turn it would be there to inspire Herc to make this classic film. Everything just kind of lined up, yay for tragedy. And for the film's smaller size and scale, Carnival of Souls is in turn just so rich in atmosphere and really is a masterclass in dread. Something that literally no other films at the time were achieving. And try to put yourself back in those days, I think it would be such a mesmerizing sight to see this film for the first time. But in fact, it was largely misunderstood upon its small initial release. People just didn't get it, you know what I mean? And it didn't help that when it came time to sell the film and get it distributed, Harvey just ran into brick wall after brick wall, And that's why the film all but disappeared for over a decade, really, as Harvey just kind of gave up on it, after its initial misunderstood release and got back to work making his other films. So, he gave Hilligoss his blessing to go forward with her idea when they met at this reunion. So he was basically like, yeah, you go ahead. If you want to deal with the trouble, see what you can dredge up and let me know. so Harvey seemed interested enough, but he wasn't really ready to put in all the work. Yet Hilligoss, man, she remained headstrong, and she got a script together. Apparently it's pretty good. I couldn't find any treatments online. And even, the film's cameraman was on board to help from the original film, so it's not like nobody was trying to get this done. In fact, it was the original cameraman. His name was Reza Badil. I hope I didn't butcher that. But Reza Badil, he's the one who raised interest from a former Lorimar exec named Peter Sobey, and remember that name. But when they landed a meeting with Shoreline Pictures to produce the film, ultimately they passed, but it seems Sobey was still interested. And with the intervening years of trying to get this thing off the ground, Candace would spend much of her time pushing the film, promoting it across the states, appearing in different places, while also still pursuing the idea of a legitimate sequel. It was then that Peter Sobey came calling, as he recently left Shoreline Pictures, and he was wondering, hey, Candace, are you still interested in getting this little sequel made? Because let's do it. Why not? You can trust me, right? So off they went, and they met with studios and production heads to try to get something off the ground, pushing this thing further and further. Now, this is around the early 90s that all this was happening, late 80s, early 90s. And they agreed to be equal partners, which is when things got cooking. And that's whenever Peter Sobey asked for a one-on-one meeting with Herc Harvey to iron out the details, ensure Herc's involvement and whatnot. And it was at that fateful meeting where somehow Peter Sobey got an option for the sequel directly from Herc Harvey, an option that, surprise, surprise, did not involve Miss Hilligoss. And without even a goodbye, Sobey just disappeared. He just straight up ghosted Candace Hilligoss. What a fucker. That is until a few months later, while reading Variety, that Candace Hilligoss saw the announcement from Trimark Pictures, of all places, that they were producing a Carnival of Souls remake. Needless to say, she was pissed. She referred to Herc Harvey and original writer John Clifford as having betrayed her, and it seems they never made up, which really is a shame. Now, I'm not sure on that, I couldn't find anything, but it seems that they never really made amends. And to add insult to injury, Peter Sobey would months later finally get a hold of Hilligoss and would ask her to have a cameo in the film. What a dick. Then he would get his assistants to call her and try to convince her that it would be fun if she showed up for a photo op with the cast, and if she showed up at the red carpet premiere, this big premiere this film must have got, all of which Hilligoss blatantly denied. Good for her. So yeah, they threw Wes Craven's name on the thing because apparently he was a big fan of the film. And, it's, in my opinion, I'm pretty sure once Wes Craven showed some interest, I think that's whenever Peter Sobey was like, hey, we don't need Candace. This is how we're going to do this. We're just going to throw Wes Craven's name on something. Now, this wasn't the first Wes Craven Presents film. I don't think it was. It definitely wasn't the last. And they're not necessarily the mark of quality, if you know what I mean. And even Wes Craven would get some blame from Hilligoss, who she was just basically blaming him for being part of the shaming of the original, And the sequel was released direct-to-video in 1998 to abysmal reviews and just even worse fan reactions. I mean, they really disrespected this movie.
Wes Craven presents Carnival of Souls, an Adam Grossman film based on the 1962 cult classic. The order date is February 1st, and the street date is February 23rd.
I never hold a grudge once I get even.
From Trimark Home Video, rated R.
I recently championed director Adam Grossman's other film that I saw, Sometimes They Come Back Again. That was in my last video. Check that one out next. And I do love that film, but here, it just doesn't work. I mean, I like the low-budget look and feel, if I'm being honest, here in the Carnival of Souls remake. Most of the time, at least. And the eerie, downer vibes happening here in the film. Again, I like those most of the time. But they really go out of their way to bastardize elements of the original for no real reason. For starters, I mean, the entire story is totally different. Instead of a story about a woman maneuvering her way between life and death, we get a bizarre tale about a sexually depraved circus clown that comes back for revenge after, going to prison. And I don't know, has some kind of dream sequence powers, it seems, because there's a lot of those. I don't know what the hell's happening here. Even the smallest elements reproduced from the original film are so drastically and unnecessarily different. Instead of the eerie spirits dancing around and doing the haunting in the original, we get these strange, spastic, car wash loving, discarded bubblegum looking ghouls. I don't understand the whole fast moving thing. It is not working. Whatever you think that's doing, unless it's sometimes they come back again, it is not working. But that's just a small change. I mean, they take liberties with major plot points as well. The original film, of course, starts with a dramatic car accident that sends our lead along with her friends over the edge. And, you know, we kind of see her dredge out and be seemingly the only survivor. She drags herself out of the water, you know, in pure shock in the film's opening moments. Yet in the remake, this quote-unquote famous car crash scene comes much later, and really, I'm not even sure if it was an event in the film or what, because there's so much dream sequence shit happening here, and it drives you crazy. It's like those movies that mess with your mind. Some of them are good, some of them are terrible. This is the worst kind. However, the film does utilize an actual carnival, sort of. I mean, these scenes are probably more goddamn dream sequences for all I know, whatever. But there's a functioning carnival in the remake. Famously, in the original film, you know, it was all conceptualized whenever Herc drove by this abandoned carnival, and he based the classic around the location, but it was never really a functioning, up and running carnival. So at least this Carnival of Souls has a carnival. I'm fishing here for compliments. Aside from the things I mentioned earlier, I suppose if I was being nice, I'm a fan of Shawnee Smith, you know, in anything she's in, I guess. And of course, I'm a huge fan of Larry Miller, especially like his stand-up comedy, which I always thought was very underrated. And, you know, he's good in this movie. It's cool to see him play a kind of a menacing character rather than, you know, the business asshole, you know, from Nutty Professor and every other movie you've seen this guy in. But I've always really liked him in 10 Things I Hate About You as well. I kind of like that that's the movie people remember this dude. And, you know, and not the Carnival of Souls remake. Not that either of them do much for this flick, though. I mean, the Carnival of Souls remake, it's not it. It's just a mean-spirited, ugly, disrespectful, and unnecessary remake, if ever there was one. It's just more personal than other offensive remakes. Even like bad remakes of just classic horror films that really felt disrespectful. This one really takes home the gold, especially considering how they treated Candace, who even today, she champions the original film and loves talking to fans. You can visit her website for autographs and her book and whatnot. A lot of cool stories on there and archive interviews. In fact, that's where I found a lot of this info that I'm sharing with you guys today. I'll put all those links below. Before the remake was released, Candace was asked if she thought the remake would be successful, and also what she thought about producer Peter Sobey, who stole the potential sequel from us all. This was her epic response. Okay, I'll tell you what I would say. To be an artist, one must search for the truth. If he, as a filmmaker, is consumed with how to cheat and connive, there is no room to be an artist, because he is no longer in a position to search for the truth. You cannot possibly do anything worthwhile if you don't have that soul in you. Since he doesn't, there's no way this movie will be any good. Hell yes, Candace. Couldn't have said it better myself. And after all these years, hopes of a legit sequel are not completely lost. Mega fan Matthew Irvin would ironically make a thesis film in college that reminded everyone of Carnival of Souls, although he hadn't seen the film, so he sought out a copy and fell in love. And as fate would have it, that at that point in his career, he was working under Peter Sobey with his company Shoreline, and this is when they were in the early stages of trying to get a sequel made. So apparently Irving wrote his own treatment for a remake, and I don't know if it had anything to do with Candace's. I couldn't really find much info on that, but it was apparently a script for a sequel that Sobey was apparently considering. So, which is kind of messed up, because I think he was also leading on Hilligoss and her script as well, you know? So this dude was just trying anything. Needless to say, they both kind of got screwed. So, it seems that Sobey and Irving stayed mutual, though, as they pursued the rights for the film and were also able to purchase all negatives from Herc Harvey himself. That's how we got that immaculate Criterion edition of the film. And now it looks like Irving is the one that's really pushing for the project. This time with eyes in the back of his head, I'm sure, to avoid getting screwed over again by the punctual Peter Sobey. So, and when asked about it in 2016, if there was going to be a remake anytime soon, Irving had this to say. If we do a remake, it will be something worthy of the original film. Something that is different, weird, creepy, and original. Something that would make Herc proud. I don't have fuck you money, but I have fuck you time. I've been involved with Carnival of Souls for so long that I won't do anything with it until the right people come along and want to treat it seriously. Like Criterion and the Blu-ray. We had other offers for Blu-ray releases, but went with Criterion because, well, they're like the Cadillac of that particular film market. Which is right, and I, for one, am really hoping for a legitimate sequel, but I'll take a remake if they're going to stay to their word here and do it right. I just hope Candace is still going to be around to make that happen. Who knows what'll come for the future of Carnival of Souls. Regardless, though, when it comes to that groundbreaking original film, we know more and more fans will jump on board and that it will continue to grow a broad audience and be revered to the end of time. And when it comes to the 1998 remake, though, we know that everyone will continue to not give a shit. Please follow me on TikTok and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe here on Staunch TV and leave me a like and a comment, why don't you? Have you seen Carnival of Souls, the original or the remake? Let me know down below. And leave me a movie recommendation for Staunchoween, why don't you? I'll be back. We are just getting started. See you soon.